Thank you for watching another segment of the Jermaine Brown Sports Talk Show. Today is Tuesday, January 7th, 2014. Last night, there was an epic battle, a very good battle. Actually, it turned out to be a great game, to be honest with you, between Florida State and Auburn for the BCS National Championship game. Now, usually most BCS National Championship games don't have this level of excitement. Usually most BCS Championship games, they're not even that good. But this was one of those games where it had a lot of drama to it. And maybe because it's played in the Rose Bowl, and the last time that the National Championship game was played in the Rose Bowl, which was 2006, also had a lot of drama to it and had an epic finish. So did this one. Now, in this game, Florida State was clearly the favorite team, or the favorites going into this game. Vegas loved Florida State. Auburn was a team that, and I don't want to disrespect Auburn because Auburn is a very good team. Auburn is a team that they play solid defense and they run the ball very well. Those are the two things they do well. Now, if you watch Auburn, they play in the SEC. And what made Auburn interesting is this. Their games, a lot of times, came down to the end. And a lot of the games. You look at Auburn, my issue with Auburn is this. Two of your games, in particular, one against Georgia, which turned out to not really be that good this year, by the way. You needed a Hail Mary to win the game. Now, they didn't run the ball as well. They ran for about 89 yards. But that game, you needed a Hail Mary to win. And then you had to play the following week against Alabama. And you basically needed a kickoff return to win, where Nick Saban made a mistake going for such a long field goal. And the guy runs it back for the touchdown, and that puts them in the SEC championship game. And I'm going to be honest, if the BCS had their way, and the BCS, the people who do the voting for who plays for the national championship, if they had their way, Auburn would not have been playing in last night's game. And I'm going to explain to you why. The BCS, because notice, they had Alabama ranked 1 before they played Auburn. Before Alabama played Auburn at the end of the season. Alabama was ranked 1. Ohio State was ranked 2. And I'm sorry, Florida State was ranked 2. Ohio State ranked 3. Auburn ranked 4. Missouri ranked 5. Now, I want you to keep that rankings in memory, okay? Alabama ranked 1, Florida State ranked 2, Ohio State ranked 3, Auburn ranked 4, Missouri ranked 5. After the Auburn game, Alabama game, which is the last game of the season for the SEC, by the way, or for the between those two teams. When Auburn upset Alabama, okay? When Auburn upset Alabama, here was the new rankings. Florida State ranked 1, Ohio State ranked 2, Auburn ranked 3, Alabama ranked 4, Missouri ranked 5. Now the question you should ask yourself was, why would they not rank Alabama behind Missouri? Why would they keep Alabama ahead of Missouri, especially when Missouri won its last game of the season on that same weekend? And here was why. Because you see, the BCS or the voters was trying to make a way where if Auburn had lost to Missouri in the SEC championship game, They wanted a feasible way that they could put Alabama to play in the national championship game in the event Ohio State lost to Michigan State. Now, let's take out Ohio State because Ohio State did lose to Michigan State in their Big Ten championship game. So what this basically means is, what the BCS was counting on, assuming they already figured that Ohio State was going to lose to Michigan State, what they were counting on was that Missouri beats Auburn, so that it gives Auburn 2 losses. They can now put Alabama in the national championship game and screw Missouri, because that was what they were going to do. And the reason they was going to screw Missouri was for a couple of reasons. Number one, Alabama has a national following, Missouri doesn't. 2, Alabama is a recognized national brand, name school. Missouri isn't. So they was going to screw Missouri. Now, the BCS could say what they want, but they were going to screw Missouri. Because if they had every intention of being fair, why not put Alabama behind Missouri? Especially when Missouri won its last game, Alabama did not. So had Missouri beaten Auburn in the SEC championship game, you don't have this epic battle you had last night. And let me go on and say this. Had Alabama played Florida State, I don't think that game would have been nearly as good as last night's game. Okay? That game would not have been nearly as good because, first of all, to beat Florida State or to have a shot against Florida State, let me put it to you that way. To have a shot against Florida State, you cannot do it with a traditional offense. What do you think the type of teams that Florida State played in their own conference, the ACC, throughout the season, with the exception of a few? They played traditional offenses. Okay? NC State. Okay, let me see. Boston College. Teams that have traditional set offenses. And what did Pittsburgh, and what did Florida State do? They slaughtered these teams. The games were not really competitive. So just keep that in mind. The best thing that happened was that Auburn beat Missouri in that SEC championship game, and that's why you had Auburn, and not Alabama in the national championship game. And here's why Auburn was a deserving participant in the national championship game. Because of their type of offense, they can give you problems. They gave a lot of teams problems during the season with that type of offense. It's not conventional. And if you don't want to believe me, first of all, they don't even run, the type of offenses that are generally ran in college football, let's right now stick to college football. Well, let's first go to the pros. The type of offenses you generally see at the pro level is a pro-style offense, a West Coast offense, a spread offense, or now what they call the read option offense. Those are the only 4 that you would see at the pro level. At the college level, there's a little bit more. You get the pro-style offense, you get the West Coast offense, you get the spread offense, you get the read option offense, you also get what is called the wishbone. There are a few teams that still run the wishbone, a la Navy, Army, well, forget Army, but Navy and Georgia Tech are 2 schools that are notorious for running the wishbone. That's a very difficult offense to prepare for. The reason being is because you're not used to seeing it. Then they run what is called the Auburn offense. Now, why do I call it the Auburn offense? Okay? Because it's an amalgamation, or a mixture, should I say, a mixture of the read option with the wishbone, with the spread. It's very innovative what Gus Malzahn has done. Okay? If you don't want to believe me, let's take a man who is new to being an analyst on ESPN. He wants to be a quarterback in the NFL, but he cannot be. No team wants him as their quarterback, so now he just got hired for ESPN to be the analyst for college football. And before last night's game, this is what he said. And this is Tim Tebow, by the way, for those who want to know who I'm talking about. When they asked him about the Auburn running game, they only run a few plays, but they run them from a lot of different formations, and they disguise them very well. They run counter, they run power, they run jet sweep, and they run inside zone. That means different types of runs. It's hard to prepare for that, okay? They've done those plays thousands and thousands of times. So when you're coming into a game with a lot of pressure and a lot of hype, a lot of nerves, it's easy to do something you've done a lot, rather than going into a game with a lot of adjustments and a lot of new plays. That's why I think they'll come out fast, which means he was predicting that they was going to start the game well against Florida State. Then they asked him about, well, what is Auburn's motivation? Okay? Here's what Tebow had to say about Auburn's motivation. To be an underdog in the national championship game for 6 weeks in a row, which means the analyst was picking Florida State as the favorite 6 weeks in a row, to have analysts, all the commentators, all the know-it-alls say you're not as good, you haven't put enough in, that will fire you up for 6 weeks. Hearing this, that will fire you up for 6 weeks in a row. It gets you ready to play because we, the Florida Gators, heard that in 2006. In 2006, the Florida Gators played the Ohio State Buckeyes. Everybody picked Ohio State because everybody said Ohio State is better. And when you hear that for 6 weeks, that motivates you to play. So that's what he was saying about Auburn. Auburn's going to be fired up because they're being told they're not as good. Okay? That's going to fire them up. Then he also predicted that they was going to start fast. They was going to start out the gate very well. Then they asked him about Jameis Winston's weakness. Jameis Winston, the quarterback of Florida State's weakness. You don't go into this game trying to stop him. You go in trying to control him. The two teams that have done that the best this year are Duke and Boston College. What they did was have multiple fronts, multiple blitzes, and multiple coverages. One thing in breaking down all his games is, and this isn't really a weakness, but it's just a few plays that he hasn't been as good at. It's when he's been throwing interior routes, benders, end cuts, digs, shallow crosses, is when I feel he struggles the most. This was Tim Tebow's analysis before the game. So what he was saying was that Jameis Winston struggles with the end cuts. In other words, he's not quite as good there. And if you change up your coverages, change up your blitzes, you could throw him off, which is what happened. That's what Auburn did, and that's why Auburn was successful in the first half of that game. Defensively, they were very strong the first half of that game. But here's another Tebow prediction. You know what? I have to say, Tebow has a business. He has a future as an analyst. The man understands the game. Now, he might not know how to play it, but he understands the game. Here's Tebow's prediction on the game. Tebow, Auburn might be a team of destiny, because that's what people was calling them going into the game, a team of destiny. But tonight, Florida State is deeper from top to bottom. When Jameis Winston and Telvin Smith's leadership in the fourth quarter, I think they're going to win 35-31. What was the actual results of the game? Florida State 34, Auburn 31. So he was off by 1 point. I got to give that man some credit. The man understood the game. What he was saying was that Auburn's good, but Florida State is better. And usually in these games, the better team, come the fourth quarter, elevate themselves. The better team eventually comes through. The better team eventually figures it out. What happened in last night's game, folks? Auburn dominated the first half. Then right before halftime, Jimbo Fisher called a fake punt, which turned the tide of the game, but more importantly, it kept Florida State in the game. Now, a lot of people say, oh, he took a lot of risk doing that. No, he did not. He did not take the risk in that call because here's why. His team was taking on water real fast. So had he punted that football and Auburn went down and scored, the game was over. Had he went for the fake, which is what he did, and he failed, the game was over. So what did he have to lose by trying the fake punt? In my opinion, he had nothing to lose. At least the fake punt, if it works, it gives his team a shot. It gives his team a shot. Then Nick Saban said something after the game that I also thought was profound regarding the fake punt. He said it was an ingenious play. He said it didn't matter if it worked or not. He says he remembered calling that against LSU this year. That he called a fake punt, the play didn't work, and he scratched his head like, oh my God, what did I do? I might have just cost my team the game. But lo and behold, it fired his players up when they came out and they won the game. And then afterwards, they thanked the coach for going for the fake punt. He said, this is Nick Saban's words. And he's like, why? He says, because it showed the coach was trying to win the game. He cared enough about the game to try to win it. He wasn't coaching scared. So that fired his team up, just for the fact that he went for it, even though it didn't work. The fact that he went for the fake punt. I thought that was very interesting analysis after the game. But anyway, getting back to the game. So, instead of going into halftime down 18 or more points, they went into halftime down 11. 11 is much more manageable than 18 or more points. And then Florida State slowly but surely in the second half started to figure it out. They finally figured out what it was Auburn was doing, not only offensively, but defensively. And they were able to now stabilize, in other words, take control of the game. And what do I mean by that? If the game started in the second half, instead of in the first quarter, if it started in the third quarter, I don't think this game would have been that close. Because you could tell that Auburn was going to have problems with Florida State at that point. Because Florida State's offense started to get going. And what they did is they went to shorter, basically dink and dunks. They weren't going for the big plays that they was trying to go for in the first half. So they just made it easier for Jameis Winston. And that really picked up Florida State's momentum, their game. And then they ran a kickoff back for a touchdown. I mean, the game was really an exciting game. And both teams belong there. Both teams deserve to be there. Both teams could have easily won this game. I mean, Auburn could have won this game, folks. This wasn't a game where you could say, wow, this team really never had a shot to win. Those are the type of games that are good. Now, personally, I'm not a big fan of waiting 30 or more days to play your championship game. And I'm going to explain to you why. Because when you got two different teams, if you got one team that is known for their passing and another team that's known for their running, Waiting 30 days doesn't affect a team that runs the football. As a matter of fact, it actually helps them. Because why? It allows you to heal up. Running is more about imposing your will on your opponent. And the more rest you have, the easier you're able to do that than if you had to play a week or two after the season. You give a team that runs the football a month off, they can put a lot of use to that. Where a team that likes to pass the ball, a la Florida State, they do run, but they mostly live off the pass. Okay, a team that likes to pass the ball a lot, they require timing, precision, rhythm. It's hard to do that when you have a 30-day layoff. That's why even in 2006, you had USC and you had Texas. Texas was mostly known for their running. USC was mostly known for their passing. Okay, with Matt Leinart and company. And it took Texas a half before their offense really got going. The same way it happened last night. It took Florida State a half before their offense really got going. So I'm not really a big fan of the 30-day waiting period, but when you think more about it, it may actually be a good thing because at least it gives a true underdog an opportunity. Where if they played a week or two after the season, the results might be dramatically different. Now when I come back, we're going to switch over to the NFL because there are a couple of important topics that I want to talk about. Thank you. I'll be back. Welcome back to the Jermaine Brown Sports Talk Show. Today is Tuesday, January the 7th, 2014. I want to talk about the Cincinnati Bengals real quick. Because their owner came out a couple of days ago, let's say almost a week ago, sometime last week, let's put it that way, before their wild card game. And he made it clear that he wanted, in 2011 draft, that's the draft that Cam Newton, Andy Dalton, Blaine Gabbert, Christian, the guy from Florida State, Colin Kaepernick, okay, Jake Locker. That's the draft that they came out with, the quarterback draft, that 2011 quarterback draft. Christian Ponder, that's the guy I was trying to think of. Christian Ponder from Florida State, okay? Colin Kaepernick from Nevada. You had this, and he made it clear that he wanted to his scouts, well, not to his scouts, but to his coach and offensive coordinator, to his personnel, that he wanted Colin Kaepernick. Now, this was the owner / GM, Mike Brown. Now, I didn't know at the time that he was the GM, but basically he was the owner and the GM. Now, usually, what does the owner know about personnel? Obviously, his scouts told him that Colin Kaepernick, outside of Cam Newton, was the best prospect to go after. Now, they weren't in position to draft Cam Newton, but they were in position to draft Colin Kaepernick because they drafted Andy Dalton in the same round, and they drafted him about a pick or two earlier. So it came down between Dalton or Kaepernick. The owner said he wanted Kaepernick. Kaepernick had the more upside. Kaepernick was more talented. Kaepernick was more athletic. Kaepernick, he felt, could change his franchise much quicker or in a better way than Dalton. Yet he was talked out of it by Jay Gruden. He mentioned that he was talked out of it by Jay Gruden, and I also suspect Marvin Lewis, because usually the head coach and the offensive coordinator, they're in lockstep with each other. especially if the coach brought in the offensive coordinator. They're usually in lockstep with each other. And after listening to Marvin Lewis's comments today, I'm even more so in the camp that they were in lockstep with each other. Okay? The reason they wanted Dalton was because Dalton was considered the more pro-ready quarterback. Okay? By all the analysts, he was considered the more pro-ready quarterback. So, and he fit Jay Gruden's West Coast offense system better than what Kaepernick fit at that time. That was in Jay Gruden's explanation to Mike Brown. That was Jay Gruden's reasoning. Okay? Now the owner is lamenting that decision. And there are some who are saying that the owner should have overrode that decision. Now, I'm not necessarily a believer in that, but we'll get to that later. But after listening to Jay Gruden's explanation, I'm starting to go more into that camp that maybe the owner should have stepped in and said, you know what? You either conform or we find somebody who can. And why do I say that? Because I didn't like Jay Gruden's explanation. Yes, Mike Brown did say that, but you got to understand that at the time, the read option was not the norm, and I'm a West Coast guy, and he didn't fit my system, and Andy Dalton fits my system better. Buddy, you're making excuses. Just realize, it's okay. Listen, folks, making a mistake is not the worst thing. Everybody makes a mistake. Everybody gets it wrong once. It happens. But what's worse than making a mistake is making a mistake but not admitting you made a mistake. Making a mistake but denying you made a mistake. That's worse. That's what we call cowardly. And when you do that, you fail to get better. Because how are you going to get better if you never acknowledge you made a mistake? If you pretend that you was right. Now, Jake Gruden can get up there and say, and Marvin Lewis can get up there and say what they want. But history is showing that Mike Brown got it right. Kaepernick is the better quarterback. And he was better from day one. Now, you could say, well, Dalton puts up better numbers. But when did Dalton win? Name the last big game Dalton won. It'll be the first. The next big game Dalton wins will be the first. How many big games Kaepernick has already made a career of winning big games. How? Even Mark freaking Sanchez has won some big games. Come on, folks. Mark Sanchez was not in that 2011 draft. I'm just making a point. How even Tebow has won a big game or two. And you mean to tell me this guy Dalton can't win a big game? He gets worse at big games. Oh, he puts up great regular season numbers. But when it counts the most, you can never find him. He's holding your team back. And what's going to happen is Mike Brown eventually is going to get frustrated enough to say, I want to change. Not only at the quarterback position, but at the coordinator position and head coach. Because if the head coach and the coordinator cannot understand that, you know what, maybe now is the time to address this position, then that tells me you just don't get it. Because Jay Gruden is sitting there saying, well, look, Aaron Rodgers is not coming through that door. We're not trading for Aaron Rodgers. No one's asking you to trade for Aaron Rodgers. All people are saying is that there is some good quarterbacks coming out in this year's draft that you might want to take a look at one or two of them and actually bring them in, using them in your first or second round pick to put a little pressure to Andy Dalton. That's all people are saying. And I ran some numbers, and I want to go through some of these players that I know will be there when they're ready to pick. Now, in this year's quarterback class, here's the guys that you pretty much already know is coming out. Teddy Bridgewater. Now, you're not going to be able to get him because he's going to be most likely the number one pick. You're drafting too low to get him, so you're not going to get Teddy Bridgewater. A guy by the Teddy Bridgewater out of Louisville. Then you got a guy by the name of Blake Bortles out of UCF. There's a good chance he's not going to be there when you're ready to pick. Okay? Then you got Taj Boyd, who's a senior, out of Clemson. Now, he will be there when you pick. And Braxton Miller, who's a junior, out of Ohio State. Depending, I thought he was a senior, but he's actually a junior this year. If he chooses to go back to school for his senior season, then you will not be able to draft him. But if he comes out like I think he will be there when you pick. Now, why am I saying look at a Braxton Miller or a Taj Boyd? Because those two will be there when you pick. Okay? Why am I saying look at Braxton Miller and Taj Boyd? Here's why. Taj Boyd has won quite a few big games. Okay? And if you look at his completion percentage, each year that he's played, he's gotten better. This year, his completion percentage is 68%, 68.5, say 69%. He throws for 9 yards per attempt. He threw for over 3,800 yards this year. 34 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. But what does Taj Boyd bring to the table that Andy Dalton doesn't? Athleticism. When the play breaks down, that's very important. Folks, in today's game, when the play breaks down, when there is no receiver open, you need that quarterback that can make plays with his legs. Cincinnati could have used that this past Sunday. A guy who can make plays with his legs. Taj Boyd can do that. Taj Boyd even has a stronger arm than Andy Dalton. And I even believe is more accurate than Andy Dalton. Okay? Let's take a look at Braxton Miller. Braxton Miller, and let's just assume for the moment he's coming out, because I don't know if he's coming out or not, because he's got another year of eligibility. So let's just assume for the moment he's coming out. Now, before looking at this man's numbers, I wasn't a big fan of Braxton Miller, and still am not quite a big fan or sold on Braxton Miller in the college game. But some guys actually perform better in the pros than they do in the college game. It just, for some reason, that's just the way it is. Some guys perform better in college than they do at the pros. Andy Dalton is a classic example. He was a great college quarterback, or a really, really good college quarterback, but at the pros, he's at best average. He's good. He's what I would call a Matt Schaub. Matt Schaub puts up great numbers in the regular season, but he's a numbers guy. But he doesn't win any big games. You can't count on him for any big games. That was Matt Schaub's problem. That's Andy Dalton's problem. Okay? It's the same problem. Now, what does Braxton Miller bring to the table? Braxton Miller is bigger. Braxton Miller also is more athletic. Okay? Now, I looked at his stats, and actually, he hasn't done bad this year. I mean, his numbers have gotten much better this year, much, much better this year than they were last year. Or the year before, which surprised me. I knew he was better this year, but I just didn't know how much better. But last year, his completion percentage was only 58.3. I'm sorry, that's just not going to get it done. This year, he's almost in the mid-60s, 63.5, 64%, folks, completion percentage. That's significant. And he's thrown for more yardage this year, slightly more than he did last year. So that means he was much more efficient. And plus his yards per attempt was more, 8.21 compared to 8.03 last year. Now, that's not that significant, but that's still healthy. But here is the big difference. Last year, 15 touchdowns he threw for, 6 interceptions. Mediocre, in my opinion. This year, 24 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. I didn't know this when I looked at before looking at his stats. Now, why would a Braxton Miller fit perfectly for Cincinnati? Now, I wouldn't draft Braxton Miller in the first round because I think Braxton Miller will be there in the second. So I would wait till the second round to get Braxton Miller. I might reach for Taj Boyd to draft him low in the first round. I might do that, but I believe Taj Boyd to be there in the second as well. But Braxton Miller, I would wait until the second round to get him. Because looking at his numbers, he's worthy of a second round pick. And here's why I would grab him. He's 6'2", about 240, 250 pounds. 240, 250 pounds. For 6'2". The man's got an arm. The man can throw it all over the field. Okay? Now, the only thing is, you could question maybe I don't know if he's more accurate than Andy Dalton, but here's what I'm saying. Andy Dalton's not that accurate. So, in essence, you almost got a wash anyway at that position when it comes to that. But here's the big difference. When the play breaks down, he can really hurt you with his legs, which Andy Dalton cannot do. Andy Dalton's an okay runner, but nobody fears Andy Dalton outside the pocket. Braxton Miller can hurt you outside the pocket, and he can take a load. He's built like Cam Newton. So that's why if I am Cincinnati, I'm looking at I'm looking at Taj Boyd or Braxton Miller in the second round. If Cincinnati is smart. Mike Brown, here's what I'm saying. Here's what I'm going to say to you, Mike. And I got to say, Dad, you was right. And the owner's got to take over on this because his coaches are clueless. His coaches can't seem to understand that the quarterback you got now is holding you back. So what I'm doing is I'm telling them, look, that first pick, whatever pick I choose, whether it's going to be the first or second pick, the first or second round pick, that's going to be my pick. And I'm picking a quarterback. I'm going to pick a quarterback. Because I want somebody who can challenge Andy Dalton. I'm not saying this guy starts the season. But I'm just saying I want him there. So in the event Andy Dalton starts to struggle, at least you have somebody you can go to. And I expect you, if Andy Dalton struggles, I expect you to go to this guy. That's a hint that if you don't play him, if Andy Dalton struggles, you're out of here. Because Marvin Lewis doesn't have a clue. Jay Gruden doesn't have a clue. Why would you continue to support Andy Dalton? How many times is this man going to keep letting you down when it matters most, which he's putting your jobs in jeopardy before you realize that, you know what? This guy's not good enough. Nice guy. But this isn't personal. This is business. He's not good enough. So if I'm Mike Brown, this is the one time where I'm going to do what my pop suggests. And that is, look, I'm taking this here. This is my pick. Now, after that, you can go pick all the other players and pick your defense, this, that, and the other. But when it comes, I'm picking a quarterback in this year's draft, and it's going to be either the first pick or the first round, or it's going to be the first pick of the second round. In other words, when we pick in the second round. But I'm making that pick, and I'm listening to my scouts. I'm already telling my scouts, look for the next quarterback to be this for the Cincinnati Bengals. Tell me the guy I should get, and that's the guy. I don't give a darn. Oh, excuse me. I don't care, because I don't want to be cursing, in case who's watching this. I don't care if he doesn't fit your system. If you can't adjust your system to fit this guy, then it tells me you're too stubborn to be coaching here. You don't get it. You adjust your system to fit the talent. You don't force the talent into your system. That's a classic coaching mistake. The good coaches figure out what this guy does best, let him do what he does best. That's what the good coaches do. That's what the good coaches do. Okay? Now, getting back to Tim Tebow. Excuse me. This is not about him in college. He did something recently that I wanted to talk about. He asked, okay, let me back up. A year ago, George Whitfield, who is one of the most respected quarterback gurus out there in the nation. All the top flight quarterbacks go to George Whitfield. Even average quarterbacks go to George Whitfield. Okay? I can name some who are average that went to George Whitfield. Okay? Now, why is that important? And Braxton Miller is one. He goes to George Whitfield. That's why his numbers are so much better this year. That's not a coincidence. That's why his numbers are so much better this year. Braxton Miller's. He went to George Whitfield. Now, why is this important? George Whitfield a year ago, after he went to the Jets, George Whitfield offered his services to Tim Tebow and said, I can fix your problem. I can make you into a respectable NFL quarterback. Did Tebow take him up on his offer? No, he didn't. But here's what Tebow just recently did. He calls up Trent Dilfer. Now, let me give you a little history lesson on Trent Dilfer for those who may or may not know, who's watching this program. Trent Dilfer was the quarterback of the 2000 Baltimore Ravens, who won the Super Bowl. Now you say, oh, that's pretty good. Yes, that was. Except for one thing. Trent Dilfer was so bad, they asked him, don't screw it up. Just turn around, hand the ball off to Jamal Lewis, make a pass or two without throwing an interception. Can you do that? They kept it real simple for Trent Dilfer. In other words, Trent Dilfer was beyond mediocre. He was just bad. Now, bad may not be the term. He was just really mediocre. That's the term. He was below Alex Smith. Alex Smith is a competent game manager because Alex Smith will not turn the ball over. Trent Dilfer had a history of turning the ball over. That's why he was a notch below even Alex Smith. But he was the Alex Smith of that generation. If you want to use an apt comparison or the closest comparison. So anyway, he wasn't that good. Yet Tim Tebow asked Trent Dilfer to train him. Tim Tebow asked Trent Dilfer to train him. To help him so he can stay in the NFL or to get back in the NFL. Why is that such a serious mistake? Here's why. When you got one of the best who's offering to train you, if you want to be trained in anything, here's my advice, folks. Go with the best. If you really want to learn a subject, whatever subject it may be, look for the best that you can and go with them. Don't look for somebody who has knowledge, who has understanding, but they're not good at what it is they do. In other words, they weren't good at it. Here's an example. I'm going to give you, using me as the example. I want to learn about real estate, I go to the best. Louis Dahl, in my opinion, he's one of the best out there when it comes to real estate that I can get my hands on, that I can learn from. And I've learned from some people really good, guys like Dwayne and some others. But when it comes to real estate, and Dwayne's good at real estate, and I follow. Dwayne has certain, how can I say, advantages, or not advantages, that's not the right term. Dwayne is better at certain things in real estate than Louis. He's much more creative from a financially, or how to structure things, or he's much more creative, in my opinion, than Louis. But Louis is much more knowledgeable when it comes to real estate. So if I want to learn real estate, I go to Louis Dahl. If I want to learn options and trading in the stock market, I go to my friend RG. I'm not going to mention his name because he might get upset when he sees this thing, and he might not want everybody knowing, me putting his name out there. So I would just simply say RG. If I want to learn about the stock market and trading and options, I want to go to the best. I don't want to learn from somebody who wasn't very good at it. Okay? There's some guys, I'm not going to mention their name, they're not very good at it. So why would I want to go and ask them to teach me? That would be dumb. Okay? That would be dumb. It would be the same as me going to want to learn karate or kung fu. Let's say karate. And I would go to somebody who was once a student but wasn't very good at it. Oh, teach me karate. Wouldn't it be easier to go to the master? That's the easiest way to go. Go to the best. Because here's why. You're going to get the best training. Not only that, when the best speaks, people is more apt to listen to them than somebody else who speaks that really wasn't good. Like, for example, Trent Dilfer said recently, well, if you put a blindfold on the person, and let's say you cover up their face and you don't know that there's Tim Tebow, you would think he's a very good passer. Because I taught him. Trent, you may have taught him, but what did you teach him? You wasn't a good passer. So how could you, if you're not a good passer, how could you teach somebody else to be a good passer? Now, you may have knowledge of the game. I'll give you that. You're a pretty good analyst. You are a pretty good analyst on Countdown, NFL Countdown, or on ESPN. Let's just say ESPN. You are a pretty good analyst. You understand the game of football. You even understand the quarterback position. But just because you understand the quarterback position, you wasn't good at it. That wasn't your specialty. You played it, but it wasn't your specialty. You wasn't good at it. So if I want to learn how to play the quarterback position, I want to go to somebody who's good at it. Give me Warren Moon, or a Dan Marino, or a John Elway, or a Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Roger Staubach, give me a Troy Aikman, somebody who specialized at the position, who's won games and titles at the position. Somebody who's the best at the position. I'm not going to go to somebody who's mediocre, who was mediocre at the position. I don't care how much knowledge he may have. His history showed he was mediocre at the position. He did not prove himself to be good or worthy of him teaching me. So when he did that, I looked at Tebow like, you're a fool. So just because he speaks, you think a GM is going to pick up the phone and, okay, Tim, yes, I heard that Trent Dilfer was teaching you. Well, you know what? Come into camp and let me take a look at you. GMs is like, who was Trent Dilfer? Trent Dilfer wasn't no good. Now, if you had mentioned that a George Whitfield had taught you, if you had mentioned that a Warren Moon had taught you, a John Elway, a Dan Marino, one of these guys had taught you, if you mentioned that, now a GM would be more apt to say, you know what? If they're vouching for this guy, then that means he must be really good. Let me give Tebow a try. You might have got a call and actually got a real tree out, as my man Chris Rock in the movie The Longest Yard called it, a tree out. Even though it's really a tryout, but he called it a tree out, okay? You might have actually got called and got a tryout. Because why? Somebody who is legitimate is vouching for you. If you're going to have somebody vouch for you, get somebody who's legitimate, not somebody who's knowledgeable. Knowledge and legitimacy, proof, is two different things. Knowledge and somebody who has proof is two different things. There's somebody who's got evidence, some proof of success. Then I'm out to listen. Okay, talk to me. But if you got no proof of success, then I'm coming a little skeptical. You're not going to be the first guy I reach out to if I'm trying to learn that particular trade or subject. That's all I'm saying. And Tebow, this is why you're better off as a college football analyst than you're going to ever be as an NFL quarterback. Your days of playing in the NFL, buddy, unless you change positions, is realistically over. Okay? Trent Dilfer is not going to get you back in the NFL because no GM gives a cahoots about what Trent Dilfer has to say about you playing that position. Trust me when I say that, buddy. I want to thank you for watching another segment of the Jermaine Brown Sports Talk Show. I wish you guys and gals a good evening. Stay safe out there.